On New Year's Eve, Chicago lay buried beneath a merciless blizzard. The temperature had plunged to 15 degrees below zero, and the wind howled through the empty streets like a wounded animal. Snow fell in thick, relentless sheets, swallowing the city's glittering lights whole. Dominic Valenti stepped out of the warehouse on the south side, his breath forming clouds of white mist in the frozen air. His hands still carried the faint scent of gunpowder, a reminder of the business he had just concluded. The man who had betrayed him would never betray anyone again. At 37 years old, Dominic controlled most of Chicago's underworld. His name was whispered in fear across every dark corner of the city. He had built his empire with blood and iron, and he trusted no one. Not anymore. Not since Isabella. He climbed into his black Bentley, where Caesar waited in the passenger seat. The Doberman's ears perked up as his master entered, but the dog remained silent, disciplined, loyal. Caesar was perhaps the only living creature Dominic allowed close to him. The engine purred to life, and Dominic guided the car through the snow-covered streets toward his mansion on the North Shore. The route took him through the forgotten neighborhoods of the South Side, past crumbling buildings and abandoned lots where even the streetlights had given up. Then, without warning, the Bentley shuddered and died. Dominic cursed under his breath, turning the key again and again. Nothing. The dashboard went dark. The heater fell silent. In the sudden stillness, the cold began seeping through the windows like an uninvited guest. Caesar's head snapped toward the alley to their right. A low growl rumbled in the dog's throat, then erupted into frantic barking. The Doberman scratched at the window, his eyes fixed on something in the darkness. Dominic reached for the gun beneath his seat. He stepped out into the biting wind, snow crunching beneath his Italian leather shoes. His eyes scanned the shadows, searching for threats. He had made too many enemies to ignore any warning. Caesar's barking grew more desperate, aimed at a row of battered trash cans huddled against a graffiti-covered wall. Dominic approached slowly, his finger resting on the trigger. Then he heard it, a sound so faint it was almost swallowed by the wind. A whimper, a moan, something barely human. He reached the largest trash can and lifted the lid. What he saw made his heart stop. Curled inside, among rotting garbage and frozen scraps, was a little girl. Her body was nothing but bones wrapped in paper-thin skin. Her lips had turned purple, her face ghostly white. In her skeletal arms, she clutched a baby who lay completely still, not breathing, not moving. The girl's eyes fluttered open. They were huge, hollow, filled with a terror that had no bottom. Her cracked lips parted, and a voice like broken glass whispered into the frozen night. "Please, don't send us back. He's going to sell my brother." Dominic Valenti, the man who had killed without hesitation just 1 hour ago, stood paralyzed in the falling snow. And for the first time in 15 years, he did not know what to do. 6 hours earlier, the basement of Craig Peterson's house held nothing but shadows and suffering. Lily Morgan pressed her back against the cold concrete wall, her arms wrapped tightly around her 3-year-old brother Noah. The darkness was absolute. The only sound was the slow drip of water from a rusted pipe in the corner, their only source of water for the past 3 days. 3 days without food, 3 days without sunlight, 3 days of waiting for footsteps that meant pain was coming. Noah had stopped crying sometime yesterday. He was too weak now, his small body limp against Lily's chest. She could feel his ribs through his thin shirt, each one sharp against her fingers. His breathing came in shallow whispers, and his eyes had grown dull, like a candle running out of wax. Lily was 7 years old, but she had learned long ago that childhood was not meant for her. The burn marks on her left arm throbbed with every heartbeat. 7 circular scars, each one a cigarette pressed into her flesh when Craig decided she had been too loud, too slow, too alive. The newest one, just 2 days old, still wept clear fluid. She had stopped screaming after the 3rd burn. Screaming only made it worse. Heavy footsteps thundered above them. The basement door crashed open, flooding the darkness with harsh yellow light. Craig stumbled down the stairs, a bottle of whiskey clutched in his fist. His eyes were bloodshot, his face twisted with cruel excitement. He grabbed Lily by her hair and yanked her to her feet. "Tonight's your lucky night," he slurred, his breath hot and sour against her face. "Someone's coming to pick you up. You're finally going to be useful." He threw her back to the ground and climbed the stairs, leaving the door slightly open. Lily lay still, her scalp burning, and listened. Craig's voice drifted down from above, speaking into his phone. "Yeah, I got 2 of them. The girl's 7, the boy's 3, 5,000 each. That's what we agreed. The pipeline picks them up at midnight." Lily's blood turned to ice. She understood. She had heard whispers at school before Mama got sick, Stories about children who disappeared and never came back. She knew what pipeline meant. She waited. Minutes crawled by like hours. Eventually, Craig's drunken snoring rattled through the floorboards. Lily reached into her tangled hair and pulled out a hairpin. Mama's hairpin, the last thing she had given Lily before the cancer took her away. Her fingers trembled as she worked it into the padlock on the basement door, twisting, praying, begging. The lock clicked open. Lily gathered Noah in her arms. He weighed almost nothing now. She climbed the stairs barefoot, crept past Craig's unconscious body, and slipped out the back door into the screaming blizzard. No shoes, no coat, 15 degrees below zero. She ran anyway. 2 hours later, her legs finally gave out in a dark alley. Noah had stopped shivering, which terrified her more than anything. She spotted a large trash can, climbed inside with her brother, and pulled garbage over them for warmth. "Stay with me," she whispered against Noah's cold forehead. "Please stay with me." The snow kept falling, and Lily prayed to a mother who could no longer answer. Dominic stood frozen before the trash can, the wind cutting through his tailored suit like 1,000 needles. His mind, usually sharp as a blade, had gone completely blank. His first instinct was to step back, close the lid, walk away, call one of his men to handle whatever this was. He was Dominic Valenti, the king of Chicago's underworld, not some saint who rescued strays from the street. Getting involved meant complications, questions, weaknesses that enemies could exploit. He reached for his phone. Then the little girl lifted her head. Her eyes met his, and Dominic's hand stopped in midair. Those eyes, large, dark, filled with a fear so deep it seemed bottomless. But beneath the terror, something else burned. A fierce, desperate determination to protect the baby in her arms, even if it cost her everything. He knew those eyes. A flash of memory tore through his mind like lightning. Isabella, 8 years old, lying in his arms on a blood-soaked warehouse floor, bullet holes in her small body, her hand reaching up to touch his face as the light faded from eyes exactly like these. "Brother, don't. Become like them." Dominic's chest seized. For one terrible moment, he could not breathe. The little girl in the trash can flinched, pressing herself deeper into the garbage, shielding the baby with her body. Her voice cracked with raw terror. "Please, I'll do whatever you want. Just don't hurt my brother, please." She thought he was one of them, one of the monsters who had done this to her. Something inside Dominic, something he had buried 15 years ago beneath layers of blood and vengeance, stirred awake. Without a word, he stripped off his leather coat, $15,000 worth of Italian craftsmanship, now wrapped around 2 frozen children pulled from the garbage. He lifted them from the trash can as gently as his calloused hands could manage. The girl weighed nothing, her bones pressed against his arms like bird wings. The baby was even lighter, his skin the color of pale ash, his lips tinged blue. Lily struggled weakly, too exhausted to fight but too terrified to surrender. "No, no, please." Caesar appeared beside them. The Doberman, trained to attack on command, approached the children with unexpected gentleness. He sniffed the baby's face, then began licking his cheek with a warm, wet tongue. Noah's eyes fluttered open. A weak breath escaped his tiny lungs. He was alive, barely. Dominic carried both children to the Bentley. The engine, as if understanding the urgency, roared to life on the first try. He placed them in the back seat, cranked the heater to maximum, and grabbed his phone. "Marcus," he said, his voice cold and commanding. "Send a driver to my location. Now. And call Elena. Tell her I'm bringing patients. 2 children. Hypothermia, possible starvation. She has 30 minutes to prepare." He ended the call and glanced in the rearview mirror. The girl had curled around the baby like a shield, her hollow eyes watching him with suspicion and fear. Dominic did not smile. He did not reassure her with empty words. He simply drove into the storm, carrying 2 broken angels toward a house that had known no warmth in 15 years. The mansion rose from the snow-covered hills like a fortress of glass and stone, $20 million of marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and silence so thick it pressed against the walls. Every surface gleamed with cold perfection. Every room echoed with emptiness. This was the kingdom Dominic Valenti had built. Beautiful, immaculate, dead. Lily's eyes flew open, and panic seized her chest before she could take a single breath. She was lying on something soft, impossibly soft, like sinking into a cloud. The air smelled clean, not like mold and rot and Craig's cigarettes. Warmth wrapped around her body from heated blankets she had never felt before. Where was Noah? She bolted upright, her heart slamming against her ribs. Her eyes swept the enormous room. searching frantically until they landed on a small figure lying on a nearby couch. A woman with silver-streaked hair leaned over him, pressing a stethoscope to his tiny chest. Lily launched herself off the sofa. "Don't touch him." She threw her body between Noah and the stranger, arms spread wide, legs trembling beneath her. Her voice cracked, but her eyes blazed with feral desperation. The woman stepped back slowly, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. Her face was calm, weathered by years of experience, softened by genuine kindness. "Easy, child," she said gently. "My name is Elena. I'm a doctor. Your brother is very cold inside. I'm trying to help him warm up." Lily did not move. She had heard promises before. Adults always promise things before they hurt you. "I won't let you take him," she whispered, her body shaking. "I won't." From the shadows near the doorway, Dominic watched in silence. His face revealed nothing. His arms remained crossed over his chest. He had seen men twice this girl's size crumble under interrogation. Yet here stood a 7-year-old ready to fight to the death for her brother. Elena turned toward him briefly, then refocused on Lily. "No one is taking anyone," she said softly. "I just need to listen to his heart. Can you hold his hand while I do that? He might feel safer." Lily hesitated. Her eyes darted between the doctor, the unconscious Noah, and the silent man lurking in the darkness. She recognized him now, the man from the alley, the one who had wrapped them in his coat. He was not one of Craig's people, but that did not mean he was safe. Slowly, she knelt beside Noah and took his small hand in hers. His fingers were still cold, but not frozen anymore. His chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. Elena resumed her examination. A maid appeared with a tray of food, soup and bread, and warm milk. She set it on the table beside Lily. The girl stared at the food like it might bite her. Her stomach screamed with hunger, but she did not reach for it. "Feed him first," she said quietly, nodding toward Noah. "I'll eat after he eats." Elena's hands paused on the stethoscope. Something flickered in her eyes, something that looked like sorrow. When the examination was complete, Elena walked to Dominic and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "The boy needs a hospital. Severe hypothermia, possible pneumonia, dehydration, but he'll survive." She paused, her jaw tightening. "The girl. Those wounds are not from one night, Dominic. Someone has been destroying that child for a very long time." Dominic said nothing, but his hands, hidden in the shadows, slowly curled into fists. Exhaustion finally claimed Lily just before dawn. Her body surrendered to sleep, while her hands still clutched Noah's fingers, refusing to let go even in unconsciousness. Elena waited until the girl's breathing grew steady, then began her examination. What she found made her stomach turn. Elena Rossi had spent 12 years as a battlefield surgeon. She had treated soldiers torn apart by explosives, civilians caught in crossfire, victims of horrors that haunted her nightmares for decades. She thought nothing could shake her anymore. She was wrong. 3 ribs on Lily's left side showed signs of old fractures, healed crookedly without medical care. The bones had knitted themselves together at wrong angles, a testament to pain endured alone in silence. 7 circular burns dotted her arms and shoulders, each one the exact size of a cigarette tip. Some had scarred over months ago, others still glistened with fresh wounds. Elena lifted the back of Lily's shirt and pressed her hand against her mouth to stifle a gasp. Thin white lines crisscrossed the child's skin like a roadmap of suffering. Whip marks, belt marks, scars layered upon scars. The girl weighed barely 40 pounds. Stage 3 malnutrition. Her body had begun consuming itself to survive. Elena finished her notes and walked to the study where Dominic waited. She closed the door behind her and stood in silence for a long moment, composing herself. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. 3 broken ribs that healed without treatment, 7 cigarette burns across her arms, whipping scars covering her entire back. Severe malnutrition. Elena's hands trembled as she set down her clipboard. "She's 7 years old, Dominic. 7. A tear slid down the doctor's weathered cheek. She wiped it away angrily, ashamed of her weakness, but another followed. "I've seen war," she whispered. "I've held dying soldiers in my arms. But this child has been tortured. Systematically. For months, maybe years." Dominic did not respond. He walked past her, through the hallway, out onto the balcony where the frozen wind cut like razors. He gripped the iron railing with both hands and squeezed until his knuckles turned white, until his palms began to bleed against the cold metal. A memory clawed its way to the surface. Isabella, bound to a chair in an abandoned factory, bruises covering her small body. He had found her 24 hours too late. 24 hours during which monsters had done unspeakable things to his 8-year-old sister before putting a bullet in her heart. He had killed every single one of them, but it had not brought her back. Dominic pulled out his phone and dialed. His voice came out flat, deadly. Marcus, find out who did this to these children. Find out everything. Names, addresses, connections. I want it all within 24 hours. He ended the call and stood motionless in the falling snow. When he finally returned inside, he found Lily still asleep on the couch, her face twisted in nightmare. Tears leaked from her closed eyes. Her lips moved, forming words that shattered something deep in his chest. Mama, I'm sorry. I couldn't protect him. I'm so sorry. Dominic stood over her, fists clenched, jaw tight, and for the first time in 15 years, he felt something other than emptiness. Morning light crept through the tall windows, casting pale gold across the marble floors. Lily's eyes snapped open, and her hands immediately reached for the familiar softness that should have been beside her. Nothing. She sat up so fast her vision blurred. Her fingers clawed at the velvet cushions, tore through the heated blankets, searched every fold of fabric with mounting desperation. Mr. Button was gone. Lily scrambled off the couch and began tearing through the room. She checked under the furniture, behind the curtains, inside cabinets she could barely reach. Her movements grew frantic, her breathing ragged. Tears streamed down her hollow cheeks, but no sound escaped her lips. She had learned long ago that crying out loud meant punishment. Craig's fists had taught her to suffer in silence, so she wept without a whisper, her small body shaking with soundless sobs. Dominic appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. He watched the girl ransack his pristine living room, knocking over a crystal vase that shattered against the floor. His first instinct was to turn around and leave. This was not his problem. He had already done more than enough. Then Lily stopped searching. She sank to her knees in the middle of the chaos, her thin hands pressed together in prayer. Her eyes lifted toward the ceiling, toward somewhere beyond it. Mama, she whispered, her voice cracking like thin ice. Please help me find Mr. Button. You said you would always be with me inside him. You promised, Mama, you promised. Dominic's chest tightened. His feet remained frozen to the floor. He knew that prayer. He had prayed it himself once, kneeling beside Isabella's grave, begging her to come back, begging God to undo what could not be undone. Something old and buried cracked open inside him. Without a word, he turned and walked out of the room. He found Marcus in the security office and spoke in a tone that allowed no questions. The alley where I found them. There's a trash can. Inside it, somewhere, is a stuffed bear. Find it. Take as many men as you need. Marcus stared at his boss for a long moment, then nodded. Consider it done. 2 hours later, Marcus returned. In his hands was a small teddy bear, soaked with melted snow, caked with grime, one ear torn and hanging by a thread. It smelled like garbage and desperation. Dominic took it from him without explanation. He walked back to the living room where Lily sat curled in a corner, hugging her knees, staring at nothing. Noah slept peacefully beside her, his breathing stronger than the night before. Dominic knelt down, bringing himself to her eye level. He held out the ruined bear. Lily's eyes went wide. Her hands shot forward, snatching the bear and crushing it against her chest. She buried her face in its matted fur, breathing in deep, desperate gulps. Mr. Button, she sobbed, finally letting sound escape. Mama's still here. Mama's still here. She looked up at Dominic. For the first time, her eyes held no fear, only wonder. Dominic rose and walked away before she could see the crack spreading through his armor. Craig Peterson woke with a splitting headache and a mouth that tasted like death. Empty whiskey bottles littered the floor around his stained recliner. Pale afternoon light stabbed through the grimy windows. He stumbled to his feet, cursing as his boot kicked a bottle across the room. Then he remembered. The pickup. Midnight. The pipeline. Craig lurched toward the basement door, his heart already racing with dread. He yanked it open and stared down into the darkness. Empty. The padlock lay on the floor, picked clean. The concrete room held nothing but shadows and the dripping pipe. No, he breathed. No, no, no! He tore through the house, checking every room, every closet, every corner where 2 small bodies might hide. Nothing. They were gone. His merchandise had escaped. Craig grabbed his phone with shaking hands and dialed a number he had hoped never to call with bad news. The kids ran, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Sometime last night. I need more time to find them. The voice on the other end was cold as a blade. You owe us $50,000, Peterson. The children were your payment. No children, no deal. I'll find them. Just give me 72 hours. After that, you become the merchandise. We have buyers who enjoy breaking men like you." The line went dead. Craig spent the next 6 hours scouring the neighborhood. He checked alleys, abandoned buildings, dumpsters, anywhere 2 freezing children might have hidden. He asked neighbors if they had seen a little girl carrying a baby. No one had. The snow had covered every trace of their escape. As night fell, Craig made a decision. He walked into the local police precinct, rubbing his eyes until they turned red, practicing the tremor in his voice. "Please," he told the officer at the front desk, "my niece and nephew are missing. They wandered off last night during the storm. I've been searching everywhere. I'm so worried about them." Detective James Holloway took the case. A weathered man in his late 40s, Holloway had seen every kind of monster that walked on 2 legs. Something about Craig Peterson set off alarms in his gut immediately. The man's grief was too theatrical, his concern too rehearsed, and when Holloway noticed the fresh scratches on Craig's knuckles, the kind that came from hitting something soft, his suspicions crystallized. After Craig left the station, Holloway made a private call from a burner phone. "Dominic," he said quietly, "there's a man named Craig Peterson who just filed a missing persons report. 2 children, a 7-year-old girl and a 3-year-old boy. Claims they're his niece and nephew." Holloway paused. "Something's wrong here, very wrong, and I have a feeling you might know where those kids ended up." Silence stretched across the line. Then Dominic's voice came through, low and dangerous. "What do you know about this man?" "Not much yet, but I'm about to find out everything." "Do that," Dominic said. "And Holloway, if he's what I think he is, I want him breathing long enough to answer my questions." The call ended, and somewhere across the city, Craig Peterson had no idea that a predator far more dangerous than himself had just caught his scent. The dining room had never been used for its intended purpose. For 15 years, the long mahogany table had served only as a surface for spreading documents, counting money, and planning operations that never saw daylight. Dominic could not remember the last time food had been served here. That changed on the second morning. He ordered his personal chef to prepare breakfast, not the protein shakes and black coffee that sustained him through endless meetings, but real food. Pancakes stacked high with butter melting down the sides, scrambled eggs still steaming from the pan, fresh fruit cut into small pieces, warm milk in a crystal glass, toast with 3 different kinds of jam. Lily stood in the doorway, frozen. Her eyes swept across the feast like someone witnessing a miracle they could not trust. Noah sat propped in a high chair that Marcus had procured from somewhere in the early hours of morning, his small hands reaching toward the colors and smells. "Sit," Dominic said from the head of the table. "Eat." Lily approached the chair slowly, as if the floor might collapse beneath her. She climbed onto the seat. "Mr." Button clutched tightly under one arm and stared at the food before her. She did not eat. Instead, her small hands reached for the napkins. She tore one open, placed 2 pancakes inside, and folded it carefully. Then she tucked the bundle into the pocket of the oversized sweater Elena had given her. Another napkin. More eggs. Into the pocket. A piece of toast. Into Mr. Button's worn body through a hole in his seam. Dominic watched in silence, understanding settling over him like cold water. She was hoarding, preparing for the hunger she knew would come. Because it always came. Because adults gave and then they took away. Because food was a weapon, and she had learned to arm herself. He set down his coffee cup and leaned forward. "You don't need to hide food here," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "The kitchen is always open. Whenever you want to eat, day or night, there will be food. No one will take it from you." Lily's hands paused mid-fold. She looked at him with those ancient eyes, weighing his words against every broken promise she had ever received. She did not believe him. Not completely. Perhaps not at all. But slowly, carefully, she picked up a fork. She cut a small piece of pancake and lifted it to her lips. She chewed slowly, ready to stop at the first sign of anger, the first raised voice, the first indication that this was a trap. Nothing happened. Across the table, Elena spooned warm porridge into Noah's mouth. The little boy's eyes widened with each bite, something flickering to life in their dull depths, a spark returning, a tiny flame refusing to die. Caesar padded over and lay down beneath Lily's chair, his warm body pressed against her bare feet. She flinched at first, then relaxed, letting the heat seep into her frozen bones. She ate half a pancake, then a few bites of egg, then stopped. Before leaving the table, she quietly slipped one more piece of bread into Mr. Button's pocket, just in case. Midnight pressed against the windows of Dominic's study like a living thing. The fire had burned down to embers, casting long shadows across walls lined with books he never read. A glass of whiskey sat untouched in his hand, the amber liquid catching the dying light. His eyes were fixed on a photograph in a silver frame. Isabella at 7 years old, laughing at something outside the camera's view. Her dark hair wild around her face, her eyes bright with a joy that had not yet learned to fear. 15 years. 15 years since that laughter had been silenced forever. Dominic closed his eyes, and the memories came flooding back like blood from a wound that never healed. He had been 22 then, young, foolish, still believing that loyalty meant something, that the world operated on rules that made sense. His father, Don Valenti, had been grooming him to take over the family business, teaching him the delicate balance between power and restraint. Then the ambush came. 3 rival families had joined forces, striking on a night much like this one. They killed Don Valenti with 17 bullets in a warehouse on the west side. But that was not enough. They wanted to send a message. They took Isabella. Dominic had torn through the city like a hurricane, calling in every favor, threatening every contact, spending every dollar. 24 hours of searching, of praying to a God he did not believe in, of promising anything if only she would be alive. He found her in an abandoned factory on the outskirts of Chicago. Too late. They had hurt her in ways that still made him vomit when the memories surfaced. 8 years old, broken beyond repair, bleeding out on a concrete floor. He held her in his arms as the light faded from her eyes. Her last words had been a whisper against his cheek. "Brother, don't become like them." He had not listened. In the months that followed, Dominic had hunted down every man involved in his father's murder and his sister's torture. He killed them slowly, methodically, learning to enjoy their screams. He built an empire on their bones, becoming more ruthless than his father had ever been, more feared than any boss in Chicago's bloody history. 15 years later, he ruled everything, and he had nothing. A soft knock interrupted his darkness. Dominic turned to find Lily standing in the doorway, Noah cradled in her thin arms. Her eyes were wide with worry. "Mister," she whispered, "something's wrong with my brother. He's crying but no sound comes out. His face is all red and he's shaking. I don't know what to do. Please, I don't know what to do." Dominic stared at her. This tiny, broken girl had just walked into the lion's den to ask the lion for help. He had negotiated with killers. He had commanded armies. He had stared down death itself without blinking. But standing before this child, holding her suffering brother, asking him to be something other than a monster, Dominic Valenti found himself completely and utterly lost. Elena arrived within minutes of Dominic's call, her medical bag in hand and sleep still clinging to her eyes. She examined Noah quickly, her experienced hands moving with calm precision. "Colic," she announced. "His stomach is adjusting to regular food after starving for so long. It's painful, but not dangerous. He needs to be held upright, gentle pressure on his belly, and patience." She demonstrated the technique, cradling Noah against her shoulder, rubbing small circles on his back. The baby's silent screaming gradually subsided into hiccups, then soft whimpers, then exhausted sleep. "Your turn," Elena said, placing Noah into Dominic's arms. The man who had ordered executions without flinching held the infant like he was made of explosives. His large hands, so steady when gripping a weapon, trembled against the tiny body. He positioned the bottle at completely the wrong angle, nearly poking Noah's eye. "The mouth," Elena sighed. "The bottle goes in his mouth. Dominic." From the corner of the room, a small sound escaped. Lily sat curled in an armchair, watching the scene. Her hand flew to cover her lips, but not before a tiny snort of laughter slipped through. She froze immediately, terror flooding her eyes, waiting for punishment. None came. Dominic glanced at her, then back at the bottle, then at the baby who was now crying again. He looked utterly defeated. An hour later, Noah needed changing. Dominic stared at the diaper like it was a bomb requiring defusal. He attempted to unfasten the tabs, got them stuck to his sleeve, pulled too hard, and somehow ended up with the diaper wrapped around his own wrist. The smell alone made his eyes water. He grabbed his phone and called Marcus. "Get up here, now." Marcus appeared in the doorway, took one look at the situation, and crossed his arms. "No. That's an order. You're the boss of the Chicago underworld, not me. Handle your own dirty work." Marcus walked away, the hint of a smile playing at his lips. Before Dominic could respond, Lily slid off the chair. She approached the changing table without a word, gently moved Dominic aside, and began changing Noah's diaper with practiced efficiency. Her small hands worked quickly, wiping, folding, fastening, as if she had done this 1,000 times before. Because she had. When she finished, Dominic looked at her with something unfamiliar in his eyes. "Who taught you to do that?" Lily shrugged, not meeting his gaze. Nobody. I learned by myself when Mama got sick. She couldn't get out of bed anymore, so I took care of Noah, 7 years old, taking care of an infant, alone. Something shifted in Dominic's chest. Not anger, not guilt. Something he had not felt in 15 years. Respect. Later, when the children had finally fallen asleep, Elena found Dominic standing in the hallway, staring at their door. "She's remarkable," Elena said softly. "But you need to understand something. That little girl survived by becoming an adult too soon. She's been a mother, a protector, a provider, since before she lost her first tooth." She placed a hand on Dominic's arm. "Now she needs permission to be a child again. And I'm not sure she knows how." The television lights blazed hot against Craig Peterson's face, but he kept his expression crumpled with grief. He had practiced this look in the bathroom mirror for an hour before the interview. "Please," he begged into the camera, his voice cracking on cue. "If anyone has seen my niece and nephew, please contact the police. They're all I have left of my sister. I just want them home safe." He dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue, letting his hand tremble for effect. The story spread like wildfire across social media. Shares multiplied by the thousands. Comments poured in from strangers offering prayers and sympathy. A GoFundMe campaign appeared, collecting donations for the grieving uncle, searching desperately for his missing children. Craig watched the numbers climb and smiled when the cameras stopped rolling. Angela Torres did not smile. The social worker sat in her cramped office, scrolling through Craig's tearful interview for the third time. Something about his performance scratched at her instincts like nails on a chalkboard. The grief was too polished. The tears appeared exactly when they should. Every word felt rehearsed. She pulled up his file. No prior complaints, no red flags in the system. Just a man who had taken in his sister's children after she died of cancer 8 months ago. On paper, he was a saint. Angela decided to visit anyway. Craig's house sat at the end of a dead-end street, paint peeling, lawn overgrown despite the snow. He welcomed her with that same practiced smile. Offering coffee, she declined. The living room was suspiciously clean. Too clean. The smell of bleach hung heavy in the air, barely masking something darker underneath. "May I see the children's room?" Angela asked. "Of course. Anything to help." He led her upstairs to a small bedroom with 2 neatly made beds, toys arranged perfectly on shelves, clothes folded in drawers. It looked like a catalog photograph. No child had ever lived in this room. Angela's eyes drifted toward a door at the end of the hallway. A padlock hung from its handle. "What's down there?" "Basement," Craig said smoothly. "Flooded last month. Mold everywhere. Had to seal it off." Angela nodded, but her hand slipped into her pocket, fingers finding her phone. As Craig turned to lead her back downstairs, she snapped 3 photographs of the locked door. Later, she would enhance those images and find what Craig had missed. A thin smear of dried blood on the doorframe, brown against the white paint. Across town, Craig's phone buzzed with a message that made his stomach drop. 48 hours remaining. No extensions. He made another call, this one to a man named Vince, who specialized in finding people who did not want to be found. 2 kids, Craig said. Somewhere in the city. Find them fast, and there's 10,000 in it for you. Vince began his search methodically, pulling traffic camera footage from the night of the disappearance. By midnight, he had isolated a single frame, a black Bentley, license plate partially visible, parked near the alley where the children had vanished. He ran the plate through his contacts at the DMV. The name that came back made his blood run cold. Dominic Valenti. 5 days of warmth, food, and safety had begun to work miracles. Noah's cheeks had regained a hint of color, no longer the ashen gray of a child knocking on death's door. His eyes, once dull and vacant, now sparkled with curiosity as he explored his new world. He had started crawling, his small hands and knees pattering across the marble floors like tiny drumbeats of hope. Lily watched her brother's transformation with wonder and disbelief. She had spent so long preparing for him to die. She had whispered goodbye to him 100 times in that frozen basement, promising to find him again in heaven where Mama waited. Now here he was, alive, growing stronger with each passing hour. She sat cross-legged on the living room carpet, Noah facing her, and began their daily lesson. "Eat," she said softly, bringing her fingers to her lips in a simple gesture. Noah watched intently, then mimicked the motion with clumsy hands. "Sleep." She pressed her palms together against her tilted cheek. Noah tried, his version more of a face slap than a sign, but close enough. "Love." Lily crossed her arms over her chest, hugging herself. This one Noah had already mastered. He performed it perfectly, his tiny arms squeezing his own body, a toothless grin spreading across his face. From the doorway of his study, Dominic observed in silence. He had been watching these lessons for 3 days now, learning the signs himself without realizing it. His fingers sometimes moved unconsciously, practicing the gestures when he thought no one was looking. Noah spotted him. The baby's face lit up with recognition. He abandoned his lesson and began crawling toward the doorway with determined speed. Before Dominic could retreat, Noah had reached his feet and grabbed fistfuls of his tailored trousers, pulling himself upward. Dominic froze. The child hung from his pants leg, looking up at him with expectant eyes, arms raised in the universal demand to be held. "He wants up," Lily said quietly from across the room. "He only does that with people he likes. He didn't even do that with." She stopped, the shadow of Craig passing over her face. Dominic looked down at the tiny creature attached to his leg. Every instinct told him to call someone else, to hand this responsibility to anyone more qualified. He ran a criminal empire. He did not hold babies. But those eyes, trusting, innocent, waiting. Slowly, awkwardly, Dominic bent down and lifted Noah into his arms. The boy weighed almost nothing, a warm bundle of new life against his chest. Noah immediately snuggled against him, one small fist grabbing his shirt collar. Dominic lowered himself onto the floor, back against the wall. Caesar padded over and lay down beside them, completing an unlikely tableau. A mafia boss, 2 damaged children, a guard dog who had become a guardian. Noah looked up at Dominic's face, studying it seriously. Then his tiny hands moved, arms crossed over his chest, squeezing himself. "Love," Lily burst into tears. Not silent tears this time, real sobs, loud and broken and healing, pouring out of her like a dam finally releasing years of pressure. "He's never done that with anyone except me and Mama," she choked. Never. Dominic did not understand the sign, but he understood what was happening in his chest. That unfamiliar warmth spreading through frozen chambers, melting ice that had been solid for 15 years. He said nothing. He simply held on. Vince stared at the name on his computer screen, a cigarette burning forgotten between his fingers. Dominic Valenti. He had tracked down hundreds of targets over the years. Deadbeat fathers, runaway teenagers, bail jumpers who thought they could disappear. None of them had ever made his hands sweat like this. Dominic Valenti was not a man you found. He was a man who found you, usually when he wanted you dead. Vince picked up his phone and called Craig, already calculating how to deliver this news without becoming collateral damage. "I found where the kids are," he said flatly. "Where?" "Give me the address. They're with Dominic Valenti." Silence stretched across the line. When Craig spoke again, his voice had climbed 2 octaves. "Valenti? The Mafia Valenti? The one who skinned Tommy Marconi alive for skimming profits?" "The same." Craig's breathing turned ragged. No. I'm out. I'm done. I'll disappear. Mexico, Canada, anywhere. And the pipeline?" Vince interrupted. "They'll find you before you reach the state line. You know what they do to people who waste their time." The phone went silent except for Craig's panicked wheezing. Vince ended the call. His job was done. $10,000 for information, nothing more. Whatever happened next was not his problem. Craig sat in his filthy living room, surrounded by empty bottles and crushing fear. The pipeline would kill him slowly. Valenti would kill him faster. Either way, he was a dead man walking, unless he found leverage. His desperate mind clawed for options until it landed on a name whispered in dark corners: the Mendez cartel. They had been trying to take down Valenti for years, losing territory and soldiers in a war they could never win. They would pay anything for an advantage. Craig made the call before his courage could fail. "I have information," he said to the voice that answered. "About Valenti. Something he cares about. Something you can use against him." 2 hours later, he sat across from a man with dead eyes and a snake tattooed on his neck. Craig laid out everything. The children, their location, how the most feared man in Chicago had suddenly developed a weakness shaped like 2 small bodies. The cartel lieutenant smiled for the first time in the conversation. "Valenti has gone soft," he murmured. "This changes everything." They shook hands. Craig would get protection. The cartel would get Valenti's head. Everyone won, except the children. That same night, Marcus burst into Dominic's study without knocking. His face was grave. "We have a problem. My contact inside Mendez just reached out. Craig Peterson sold them information about the kids. They're planning something. Soon." Dominic sat motionless behind his desk. The glass of whiskey in his hand caught the lamplight. Amber liquid swirling slowly. Then his fingers tightened, The glass shattered, shards and whiskey exploding across his desk, blood welling from his palm where Crystal had sliced flesh. His voice came out low, barely human. They want to touch those children? They have no idea what they've started. He stood, bloody hand dripping onto the floor. Call everyone, every soldier, every contact, every favor owed. We're going to war. The mansion transformed overnight into a fortress. 20 armed men patrolled the grounds, their shadows moving past windows at regular intervals. Security cameras multiplied like eyes, watching every angle, every entrance, every inch of the property. Floodlights turned the snow-covered lawn bright as noon even at midnight. The iron gates at the driveway entrance remained permanently sealed, manned by guards who checked every vehicle with military precision. Lily noticed everything. She watched the men with guns walking through hallways that had begun to feel safe. She saw the way they communicated with hand signals, the bulges beneath their jackets, the cold efficiency of their movements. The warmth that had slowly seeped into her bones over the past week began to freeze again. She found Elena in the kitchen, preparing Noah's evening bottle. Is Mr. Dominic a bad man? Elena's hands paused on the formula container. She took a long breath before turning to face the child. He's complicated, she said carefully. He has done things that most people would call bad, but he has also done things that are good, like saving you and your brother. Lily absorbed this, her old eyes weighing the words. Will he hurt us? No. Elena's voice carried absolute certainty. Whatever else he is, whatever else he does, he will never hurt you, that I can promise. That night, while the guards changed shifts and Noah slept peacefully in his crib, Lily crept through the darkened hallways. Her bare feet made no sound on the cold marble. She had learned long ago how to move without being heard. The door to Dominic's study stood slightly open, warm light spilling through the gap. She slipped inside. The room smelled of leather and old books and something sharp she did not recognize. Her eyes swept across the shelves, the desk, the cabinet with the glass door that held guns arranged in neat rows. Stacks of money sat on a side table, more money than she had ever imagined existed. Then she saw the photograph. A silver frame on the desk, positioned where Dominic could always see it. A young girl with dark hair and bright eyes, laughing at something outside the picture. She looks like me, Lily whispered. Yes, she does. The voice came from the shadows near the window. Lily spun around, heart hammering, but her feet stayed planted. She had learned not to run. Running made it worse. Dominic stepped into the light, his face unreadable. Her name was Isabella, he said quietly. She was my sister. Was? She died. A long time ago, when she was about your age. Lily looked at the photograph again, then back at the man who terrified grown criminals. You lost someone you loved too, she said softly. Like me with Mama. Dominic did not respond. Lily moved closer, her fear momentarily forgotten. Mama told me something before she went to heaven. She said people who leave us don't really disappear. They just move to a different place, and they watch over us from there. She reached out and touched the frame gently. Maybe your Isabella and my Mama are friends now. Maybe they're watching us together. Something cracked in Dominic's chest, a wall he had spent 15 years building. He turned away before the child could see what was happening to his face. The attack came at 3 a.m, when darkness was deepest and sleep was heaviest. The first explosion ripped through the front gates, a ball of fire that lit up the snow-covered grounds like a second sun. Guards dove for cover as automatic gunfire erupted from multiple directions. The floodlights shattered one by one, plunging the mansion back into shadows. Glass exploded inward as bullets tore through windows. The crystal chandeliers swung wildly before crashing to the marble floor. Alarms screamed through the hallways, red emergency lights flashing in rhythm with the chaos. Marcus's voice thundered above the gunfire. Protect the children. 2nd floor. Now. Dominic was already running. He took the stairs 3 at a time, gun drawn, heart pounding with a fear he had not felt in 15 years. Not fear of death, fear of losing something that mattered. He burst through the door to Lily's room. The bed was empty. For one terrible second, his world collapsed. Then he heard it, a tiny whimper from beneath the bed frame. He dropped to his knees and looked underneath. Lily lay flat on her stomach. Noah pressed beneath her body, her hand clamped tightly over his mouth to silence him. Her eyes were wide open, fixed on Dominic, but they held no tears, no screaming, no panic. This was a child who knew violence intimately, a child who had learned that silence meant survival. Come, Dominic said, reaching for them. Now. Lily grabbed Noah and crawled out without hesitation. Dominic scooped them both into his arms and ran. The panic room was hidden behind a bookshelf in his study. Reinforced steel walls, separate ventilation, enough supplies to survive a week. He punched the code, and the door swung open. Caesar appeared from nowhere, slipping inside just before the door sealed shut. The sounds of battle became muffled but not silent. Gunshots, explosions, screams of men fighting and dying. Dominic set the children down and turned toward the door. His blood burned with the need to fight, to kill, to destroy everyone who had dared threaten what was his. "I have to go," he said. "Stay here. Caesar will protect you." His hand reached for the door release. Small fingers wrapped around his wrist. Lily looked up at him, her grip surprisingly strong for such thin arms. "Please don't go," she whispered. "Every time grown-ups leave during the scary times, they don't come back. Mama left for the hospital and didn't come back. Daddy went to work and didn't come back." Her voice cracked. "Please, stay." Dominic stood frozen, one hand on the door, the other captured by a 7-year-old girl who had already lost everyone she ever loved. Outside, his men were fighting, dying perhaps. They needed their leader. But this child needed something more. Slowly, Dominic released the door and lowered himself to the floor. Lily immediately climbed into his lap, pulling Noah with her. Caesar pressed against their side, a wall of muscle and loyalty. For the first time in his life, Dominic Valenti chose protection over violence. He wrapped his arms around them both and held on while the world exploded around them. Dawn broke over a battlefield. The Mendez cartel had sent 15 men. 8 would never leave the property. 4 had fled into the night when the tide turned against them. 3 knelt in the basement with zip ties around their wrists and blood dripping from their faces. Dominic's men had suffered losses too. 2 dead, 5 wounded, the mansion's front entrance reduced to rubble. But they had held the line. In the panic room, Lily had fallen asleep against Dominic's chest. Noah curled beside her, both children exhausted by terror they had learned to endure in silence. Caesar remained vigilant at the door, ears tracking every sound. When Marcus finally opened the sealed entrance, his face grim with the news of casualties, he found his boss sitting motionless with 2 small bodies wrapped in his arms. "It's over," Marcus said quietly. "We won." Dominic nodded once but did not move. An hour later, with the children safely transferred to Elena's care, Dominic descended to the basement. The 3 captured cartel soldiers hung from chains, their bravado long since beaten out of them. The interrogation was brief. They gave up everything. The phone call from Craig Peterson, the information about the children, the plan to take them and use them as leverage against Valenti before killing them both. Marcus stood beside Dominic as the last prisoner finished talking. "I'll have Craig brought here tonight," Marcus said, his voice cold with anticipation. "We can take our time with him." Dominic stared at the concrete floor, saying nothing. Then he turned and walked upstairs without a word. He found Lily asleep on the couch. "Mister," Button clutched against her chest, her face peaceful for the first time since the attack. He watched her breathe, in and out, alive and safe. "No," he said when Marcus followed him. "We do this clean." Marcus stared at his boss, as if he had spoken a foreign language. "Clean? After what he did? After what almost happened? She's been surrounded by violence her entire life." Dominic's eyes never left the sleeping child. "I won't give her more blood to remember. We do this through the law." He pulled out his phone and dialed Detective Holloway. Within hours, the wheels of justice began to turn. Dominic's lawyers filed for emergency guardianship. Holloway contacted Angela Torres with evidence of child trafficking connections. Warrants were prepared. Arrests were planned. Angela arrived at the mansion that afternoon to interview Lily. They sat together in the sunlit library, Angela with her notepad, Lily with Mr. Button in her lap. The social worker asked gentle questions, and the child answered. But her answers came out flat, emotionless, mechanical. "He burned me with cigarettes when I cried too loud. He locked us in the basement without food. He was going to sell us to men who take children away forever." Each sentence delivered like reading from a grocery list. Angela had conducted hundreds of interviews with abused children, but this level of detachment, this complete separation from her own trauma, made her pen stop moving. Tears slid down the social worker's cheeks as Lily continued her monotone recitation. This child had survived by going somewhere else inside her head, and Angela wondered if she would ever fully come back. The family courtroom felt smaller than it should have, the wood-paneled walls pressing inward as tension filled every corner. Judge Morrison, a stern woman with silver hair and decades of experience, surveyed the crowded room from her elevated bench. Craig Peterson sat at the respondent's table, dressed in a cheap suit his public defender had provided. He had shaved, combed his hair, practiced his wounded expression in the mirror until it looked almost genuine. Dominic sat on the opposite side, flanked by two of Chicago's most expensive attorneys. He wore his usual black suit, his face carved from stone, revealing nothing. Lily waited in an adjacent room with Elena, watching through a video feed. Noah slept peacefully in his carrier, unaware that his future hung in the balance. Craig's lawyer spoke first, painting a picture of a grieving uncle victimized by a dangerous criminal. My client took these children in when no one else would, he argued. He sacrificed everything for them. And then this man, this known associate of organized crime, kidnapped them in the middle of the night. Craig nodded along, dabbing at his eyes with a tissue. Then Dominic's lead attorney rose. Your Honor, I present medical documentation of injuries sustained by the minor Lily Morgan while in Mr. Peterson's care. Photographs appeared on the courtroom screen. The cigarette burns, the whip scars, the x-rays showing improperly healed ribs. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Angela Torres took the stand next, describing the bloodstains she had photographed in Craig's basement. Detective Holloway followed, presenting phone records linking Craig to a known human trafficking network. These children were not lost, Holloway stated. They were merchandise. Mr. Peterson intended to sell them. Craig's composure cracked. Lies. He shot to his feet, face contorted with rage. Those brats are mine. I have every right to do what I want with them. They belong to me. The courtroom erupted. Judge Morrison slammed her gavel. Mr. Peterson, you will sit down and remain silent, or I will have you removed. Craig's lawyer yanked him back into his seat, but the damage was done. The mask had slipped, revealing the monster beneath. In the chaos, a small voice spoke through the courtroom speakers. Please, can I say something? Everyone turned toward the video screen. Lily stood there, Mr. Button clutched against her chest, her thin frame trembling but her eyes steady. Judge Morrison nodded slowly. Go ahead, sweetheart. Lily took a shaky breath. I don't want to go back with him. He hurt me. He was going to sell my brother to bad people. I heard him say it. Her voice grew stronger. Mr. Dominic never hit me. He found Mr. Button for me when I lost him. He held me when the loud noises came. He stayed when I asked him to stay. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she kept speaking. Please don't make us go back. Please. Silence blanketed the courtroom. Judge Morrison removed her glasses and wiped her eyes. Bailiff, she said quietly, take Mr. Peterson into custody. Charges of child abuse, child endangerment, and conspiracy to commit human trafficking. Craig screamed as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. The judge turned to Dominic. Temporary guardianship is granted, pending full investigation. These children will remain in your care. Her gavel fell one final time. Craig Peterson's screams echoed through the courthouse hallways as deputies dragged him away. You can't do this to me. Those brats are lying. They're all lying. His feet scraped against the polished floor, his face purple with rage, veins bulging from his neck. The composed, grieving uncle had vanished completely, replaced by the monster he had always been. The charges read like a catalog of evil: child abuse, child endangerment, criminal neglect, conspiracy to commit human trafficking. If convicted on all counts, Craig Peterson faced 25 years to life in federal prison. The holding cell swallowed him whole. News spread quickly through certain channels. The trafficking pipeline that Craig had worked with learned within hours that their names had surfaced in court documents, phone records, account numbers, contact information. Everything Craig knew, the authorities now knew too. In the criminal underworld, there was only one response to such betrayal. 3 days after his arrest, Craig Peterson was found dead in his cell. The official report listed the cause as suicide. A bedsheet twisted around his neck, a toppled chair beneath his dangling feet. But everyone who understood such things knew the truth. The pipeline had reached inside and silenced their liability. Dominic received the news from Holloway in a brief phone call. He listened without expression, thanked the detective, and ended the call. He felt nothing, not satisfaction, not relief, not the dark joy he had expected to feel at the death of the man who had tortured 2 innocent children. Just emptiness, followed by a strange sense of completion. Some debts collected themselves. That evening, Lily found him standing at the window of his study, watching snow drift down from a darkening sky. She approached quietly, Noah balanced on her hip with practiced ease. Mr. Dominic? He turned to face her. The bad man, she said carefully. The one from before. Where did he go? Dominic considered his words. He could lie. He could deflect. But this child had been lied to enough. He went away, he said simply. Very far away. He's never coming back. Lily absorbed this information with those ancient eyes that had seen too much. She did not ask how. She did not ask why. Some part of her, the part that had survived the basement, and the burns and the hunger, already understood. She did not cry. She did not smile. She simply pulled Noah closer against her chest and held him there, feeling his heartbeat against her own. "Then Mama can rest now," she whispered. "She doesn't have to worry about us anymore." Dominic watched the two children, the last rays of winter sunlight catching in their hair. He had spent 15 years believing that justice came only from his own hands, written in blood and screams. But here was proof that the universe sometimes balanced its own scales. Craig Peterson had escaped Dominic's vengeance. He had not escaped his fate. And perhaps, Dominic thought, that was enough. Perhaps that was the way it was supposed to be. 6 months changed everything. The mansion that had once echoed with emptiness now overflowed with life. Toys scattered across marble floors that had never known such chaos. Crayon drawings taped to refrigerator doors. Laughter bouncing off walls that had forgotten the sound. Lily started school in the spring. The first day, she had clung to Dominic's hand at the entrance, terrified of the crowds, the noise, the unknown. But she had squared her thin shoulders and walked inside anyway. By summer, she had friends. Real friends who invited her to birthday parties and playdates. She came home chattering about classroom projects and playground adventures, her voice filling spaces that had been silent for 15 years. Noah flourished under the care of speech therapists Elena had arranged. His body grew strong, his cheeks round, his eyes bright with mischief. One morning, while Lily spoon-fed him breakfast, he looked up at her and spoke his first word. "Lee." Lily burst into tears and hugged him so tightly he squealed. Dominic watched it all from a distance at first, then closer still. He transferred operational control to Marcus, stepping back from the darker corners of his empire. His lawyers worked around the clock, restructuring businesses, legitimizing income, building something that could survive in the light. He learned to make breakfast. The pancakes burned more often than not, the eggs turned rubbery, the toast somehow caught fire twice, despite the fancy toaster. But Lily ate every bite without complaint, and that was enough. He learned to braid hair. His thick fingers fumbled with elastic bands and small sections, producing results that looked more like bird nests than hairstyles. Lily wore them proudly anyway, showing off his crooked work to her classmates as if it were a crown. One evening, she approached him in his study with a piece of paper hidden behind her back. "I made something for you," she said shyly. She handed him the drawing. Crayon figures stood in front of a large house, 4 of them holding hands. A tall man in black, a girl with messy braids, a small boy with a big smile, a dog with pointed ears. Above them, 2 angels floated in a yellow sky. One had dark hair like Dominic's. The other wore a dress covered in flowers. "That's Isabella and Mama," Lily explained, pointing to the angels. "They're watching us together, like I told you." Dominic's throat closed completely. He took the drawing to his desk and placed it carefully beside Isabella's photograph. 2 frames, 2 families, past and present, finally sharing the same space. Lily watched him, chewing her lip nervously. "Mr. Dominic? Yes? What should I call you?" He turned to face her, this tiny warrior who had survived horrors and somehow kept her heart intact. "Call me whatever you want," he said quietly. Lily thought for a long moment, her face scrunched in concentration. Then she looked up with those ancient eyes that had finally started looking young again. "Can I call you Dad?" The word hit Dominic like a bullet he never saw coming. He knelt down, opened his arms, and let her run into them. "Yes," he whispered against her hair. "You can call me Dad." Part 20. The Circle Complete. 1 year later, Christmas Eve returned to Chicago. Snow drifted down from a velvet sky, gentle this time, not the vicious blizzard of 12 months past. The city sparkled with holiday lights. Families gathering behind frosted windows, carols drifting from doorways propped open to welcome guests. Dominic drove alone through the quiet streets, a tradition he had started without planning to. His route took him south, past the gleaming towers of downtown, through neighborhoods that grew darker and poorer with each passing mile. He stopped the car in a familiar alley. The trash can still stood against the graffiti-covered wall, battered and rusted, holding no secrets now. Dominic stepped out and stood before it, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. 1 year ago, he had been empty, a machine built for violence, running on vengeance and whiskey, waiting to die without admitting it. He had stood in this exact spot with blood on his hands and ice where his heart should have been. Then a pair of ancient eyes had looked up at him from the garbage, and everything changed. He touched the rim of the trash can once, a silent acknowledgement, then returned to his car. Home waited. The mansion blazed with warmth as he pulled into the driveway. Before he could open his door, 2 small figures burst from the entrance. Lily sprinted through the snow in her pajamas, Noah toddling behind her on unsteady legs, Caesar barking joyfully at their heels. "Dad! Dad's home!" Dominic caught Lily as she launched herself at him, swinging her in a circle while Noah grabbed his leg and held on tight. Caesar danced around them all, tail wagging furiously. Inside, a Christmas tree towered in the living room, covered in ornaments and twinkling lights. A golden star crowned its peak, casting warm shadows across the ceiling. Lily tugged Dominic's hand, pulling him toward the tree. "I want to add something," she said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small button, worn smooth with age. It had fallen from Mr. Button months ago, and she had kept it ever since. "This is Mama," she whispered, hanging it on a branch near the star. "So she can see everything." Dominic reached into his own pocket. He had brought something too, a small photograph in a simple frame, Isabella laughing in frozen sunlight. He hung it beside the button. "Now they're together," Lily said, slipping her hand into his. They settled before the fireplace, all of them. Lily curled against Dominic's side, Noah asleep in his lap, Caesar stretched across their feet. The flames crackled softly. Snow fell beyond the windows. Peace filled every corner. Lily looked up at her father's face. "Dad, do you think Mama is happy?" Dominic gazed out at the falling snow, at the soft white world beyond the glass. "I think," he said quietly, "that your Mama and my Isabella are sitting together on a cloud right now, watching us. And I think they're very, very proud." Lily smiled and closed her eyes. The fire burned low, the night deepened, and in that room, surrounded by warmth and love, 2 broken souls finally found their peace. Some winter nights, devils find angels, and sometimes those angels save them both. My dear friends, that is where our story ends tonight. I hope this journey touched your heart the way it touched mine. This tale reminds us that redemption is possible for anyone willing to open their heart. It shows us that family is not always blood, but rather the people who choose to stay when staying is hard. And it teaches us that sometimes, the ones who save us are not the strong and powerful, but the small and broken, who simply need our love. What about you? Did any part of this story speak to your soul? Did it remind you of someone in your life, or perhaps of your own journey? I would love to hear your thoughts. Please leave a comment below and share your feelings from deep within your heart. If this story brought you comfort or hope, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. It helps our little community grow, and it ensures you never miss another meaningful story. Every day, we bring new tales of love, courage, and the beautiful moments that make life worth living. Thank you for spending this time with me. I wish you good health, daily happiness, and peace in your heart. Take care of yourselves and the ones you love. Goodbye for now, and I will see you in the next video.